Greetings and welcome to the Wednesday, October the 8th, 2025 edition of Denison Forum's Daily Article Podcast. I'm Chris Elkins, narrating today's daily article written by good friend and CEO, Dr. Jim Denison. Following yesterday's tragic October 7th anniversary, let's focus today on something more uplifting, or at least very different. I typically try to write on subjects about which I have some personal knowledge or expertise. Today, I'll not do that, or at least to begin. Instead, I want to reflect with you on the prolific output of Taylor Swift, who released her 12th original studio album last week. I am apparently unlike most of humanity in that I have heard only one of her songs one time, and that at my granddaughter's urging, have never been to one of her concerts, and have never heard a podcast or seen a movie featuring her. The closest I have come to observing her in popular media has been those times when the TV cameras panned to her in the stands watching her now fiancé Travis Kelce play tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'll turn to an expert on the subject. Ari Perez is an associate professor at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut, where she teaches a class called Taylor Swift Cultural Mirror Ball. She explains that Swift is so prolific because she genuinely likes what she does. Quoting Perez, "I think she enjoys keeping a strong, productive output so that putting music out on a continuous basis makes her happy and fulfilled." End quote. Well, that was simple, wasn't it? But there's more to the story. Next, we'll turn to another very popular media figure, Mel Robbins, the best-selling author and podcaster. Her latest book, The Let Them Theory, was the #1 selling book in 2025 and is on pace to have the best nonfiction book launch of all time. In reading it, I was impressed with the simplicity of its central formula. Let them plus let me. Let them applies to the people whose behavior bothers you. These two words are a way of admitting that we cannot control them and that they are going to do what they choose to do. Let me applies to us as we decide how we will respond proactively to what life brings us. According to Robbins, allowing people to live their lives while taking control of our own is the key to flourishing. She complimented Taylor Swift for modeling this philosophy, quote, "Let them be wrong about you. Let me get back to what I was put on earth to do," end quote. So, how do we know what we were put on this earth to do? Ray Bradbury famously offered advice that aligns with the philosophies of Swift and Robbins: love what you do and do what you love. Here's the catch. Doing what you love only leads to flourishing if what you love is worth doing. In Nicholas Wade's book, The Origin of Politics, How Evolution and Ideology Shape the Fate of Nations, he reports, on the morning of October 7th, 1969, the entire police force of Montreal went on strike. Within a few hours, gathering crowds started to loot stores. Gangs of masked men arrived to rob banks. Citizens huddled indoors as looters swept through downtown Montreal, smashing the windows of restaurants, stores, and hotels. By the end of the day, some $500,000 worth of merchandise had been looted. Not until the arrival of army troops shortly after midnight were the violence and disorder brought to an end. End quote. The Apostle Paul would not have been surprised. He listed in Galatians 5, verses 19 through 21, the works of the flesh, the things fallen humans naturally do: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. We can love doing them, but we see the brokenness they produce every day in the news. Conversely, later in the same chapter of Galatians, Paul listed in verses 22 and 23 the fruit of the Spirit, the things Spirit-led humans naturally do: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. When we love doing them, our changed lives change the world. Yesterday morning, I spent time on my favorite bench beside my favorite lake just before the sun came up. The harvest supermoon was still iridescent in the pre-dawn sky, though I could only see it in fragments through the trees that canopied overhead. However, its reflection on the lake before me was so clear as to mirror the moon itself. This thought occurred. The source of the light, the sun, is more visible to me in the reflection of the moon. Jesus said of himself in John 9, verse 5, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Now that he's in heaven, you and I are the light of the world, according to Matthew 5, verse 13, called to reflect his light in our darkened culture. Others cannot see his light in our hearts, however, but in the character we manifest through the circumstances of our lives. Our acts are a reflection of the reflection of our source. How does this work in practical terms? Jesus tells his followers in John 15, verse 5, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit." When we know Jesus personally and intimately, we will make him known publicly and powerfully. Here's why this matters. People need to know God more than they need anything else. They are made in his image and likeness, and their hearts are, quoting St. Augustine, restless until they rest in him. As a result, knowing the God of the universe and making him known is the highest purpose, privilege, and passion in life. This purpose is urgent beyond any other in our fallen world. On this day in 1871, the great evangelist Dwight Moody preached in Chicago to the largest congregation he had ever addressed in that city. In the book, The Life of Dwight L. Moody, written by his son, William R. Moody, we read that Moody paraphrased Matthew 27:22 that evening, the question of Pontius Pilate, "What shall we do with Jesus, which is called Christ?" He challenged the congregation to think about this question during the week and return to church the following Sunday when, quote, "we will decide what to do with Jesus of Nazareth," end quote. But as he later said, "I have never seen that congregation since." The Great Chicago Fire began that night, killing hundreds of people, destroying thousands of buildings, and causing more than $4 billion in damages in today's dollars. Moody reflected later on the tragedy, quote, "I want to tell you about one lesson I learned that night, which I have never forgotten, and that is, when I preach, to urge Christ upon people then and there and try to bring them to a decision on the spot. I have asked God many times to forgive me for telling people that night to take a week to think it over, and if he spares my life, I will never do it again. This audience will break up in a few moments. We may never meet after today," end quote. Is the same not true for everyone you meet today? When a conversation about faith comes your way, will you be ready? It might happen at work, in a casual chat with a neighbor, or when a friend shares what they believe. In that moment, you don't get to choose the topic, but you can be ready with the truth. That's why Dr. Jim Denison wrote Biblical Insight to Tough Questions, Volume 8. This book explains 9 major world religions and alternative belief systems like Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Mormonism, and more. You'll learn how each compares with Christianity and how you can engage clearly, lovingly, and biblically with those who follow them. We'll send you a copy of Biblical Insight to Tough Questions, Volume 8, to say thanks for your donation to help keep this daily article podcast going strong and equipping you and others with biblical clarity and truth in a confusing world. So please, act today. Visit supportdf.org to help more believers think clearly, live faithfully, and follow Jesus with courage. That's support, the letter D, the letter F.org. Find the link to give in today's podcast episode notes and receive your copy of Biblical Insight to Tough Questions, Volume 8.